Silver Wolf has come out. I'm going to break this video up into two parts. My first part will be general recommendations on what you should build, either that's main stats or relic sets or whatever the case may be. The second half will be me explaining a bit more stuff about her kit and about team building for her. I may actually do a separate video depending on how long this runs on. For your stats on priority on building her, you want effect hit rate. Don't stop at 100, go a little bit above it because some enemies do want more than 100% effect hit rate to actually land a debuff on them. This is especially true if when you go into her traces, your trace isn't maxed out, as in your trace isn't level 10, specifically her skill. This 80% base chance does need to be raised up more to effectively apply that buff. If you're playing during this current time period, you should use this light cone, as in before the tutorial mission starts. It is essentially the best light cone outside of her original 5-star signature. This is actually something I'm going to recommend for everybody. If, hypothetically, we don't know how events work, I do understand we have this weird memorial thing, but I don't know if this is going to apply, as in you can still collect old rewards like this later on. So if that is the case, and it doesn't apply, let's go over some alternative options. Eyes of the Prey is a pretty good idea. Even though she's not doing damage over time, the 20% additional effect hit rate does alleviate some of the stress on getting them either as your like substats or as the main stat if you can't. And then Good Night and Sleep Well. That's kind of a general one. She does apply quite a lot of debuffs to your enemy, so you are getting that additional damage over time, or that additional damage in general. And if it's super in position 5, it's obviously 24% times 3 because she's applying way more than 3 debuffs. And if you really want to go, you can go with Hidden Shadow. I understand that she's not meant to be a damage healer. Your primary build and primary focus should always be that effect hit rate and maybe break effect if you think she's going to be the one actually doing the breaking. But in this instance, because she's doing her skill once and then for 2 turns after she's doing a basic and a basic, this does kind of work as an additional little damage bonus to her. But your primary option should always be either her F2P event-based light cone or Incessant Rain. Keep in mind, when building out her traces, she gets about 18% effect hit rate from each of these minor traces, so you can kind of alleviate some stress with that alongside your light cone. For relic sets, Pangalactic Enterprise is your top priority. This is because it gives you that effect hit rate bonus, and then also a little bit of attack based on your effect hit rate, and since that's all you're building on this character, that's all that matters. You can go with Genius of Brilliant Stars. I actually recommend that set if you've been farming it out for Zealot in particular, or maybe you've been building up QQ. Either one, as long as you have excess on those pieces, perfectly fine to slide them over to her. If you don't, and you want a nice general set for now, you can go with Musketeers. I understand I've seen some individuals talk about the Thief of Shooting Meteors. I just don't believe that in the vast majority of situations, you're going to have her being the one breaking the enemy. That's usually your main damage dealer. And if you do have her breaking the enemy, that's perfectly fine to slide this set onto her, but I don't recommend it. I'm just going for this one because Defense Ignore. Defense Ignore is great for increasing her overall damage, and even though she's not a damage dealer, any additional damage is nice. You can go with Fleet of the Ageless just for the additional attack increase to all your allies, but once again, I always prioritize this. For main stats on Relics, you want effect hit rate on the body piece, attack, or crit. This is depending on what build you're going for. Obviously, if you want a DPS build, you just build like a typical DPS. You want speed boots. The more turns she gets in, the more energy she regenerates, the more time she's having to use her ultimate. Quantum Sphere. And then I'm going for an attacker rope. You can go with energy regen rope. I'm having no issues as of right now with this attacker rope, but I understand you might. Eidolons, I'm going to be honest, all of these Eidolons are pretty good. So if you get lucky and get 1, get 2, whatever, just use them. They all are great and they're all pretty much just necessary and pretty easily functioning with her kit at base value. This just restores energy. This means your energy regeneration issues are alleviated. This just effect resistance. This actually lowers the amount of effect hit rate you need overall. What about teams? How does she slide into teams? The issue is, Silver Wolf is going to apply a quantum debuff if the enemy doesn't have one already. This is because she's quantum. So realistically, a good team is either the mono elemental team, so let's throw QQ in there, and let's say hypothetically you have a quantum healer. A full quantum team works out wonderfully for her. But if you don't, and you want to look at your other options, for teams like this with Yanqing, your biggest issue is you can go with March 7th or Japard if you have them. But because you have Ice, Quantum, Lightning, and then ice again, she's going to apply either ice, quantum, or lightning as the debuff. And don't get me wrong, she can cycle between these two, and if the enemy already has quantum, then it's one of the two. It's a 50-50 chance. But understand that she's applying it based on your teammates. So it's not just an entirely random debuff the enemy doesn't already have, it's based on the enemies and characters in your team. The more of an element you have doesn't necessarily equal the better. So if we're looking at this team, quantum, quantum, lightning, fire. If I throw out Bailu and I toss in a Asta, that's 2 fires, 2 quantums, she has a 50-50 shot between either one of these debuffs. But if I were to hypothetically replace Zila with somebody like Hook, that's remaining chance is still the exact same, because it's still a 50-50 shot between her element, which is quantum, versus the pyro or fire here. So you don't have to overcrowd your team just to hope and pray you get the right buff. Realistically, you're gonna get one of the other buffs. The main issue you run into is if you have a team with a bunch of different elements. For instance, this team right here, lightning, and then pyro or fire. But if I swap Tingyun out and replace her with Silverwolf, now there's 3 elements, and it kind of becomes a bit of an issue long term. Some bosses make this pretty easy though. For instance, in this time, I slid her pretty much in any team I felt like it. And I understand it's kind of a generalized and vague, unhelpful bit of information. But if I'm looking at this, and hypothetically speaking, I have my Yanjing on this side and my Zila on this side. Japard is already weak to lightning, and Natasha works great as your physical carry here. So, in that instance, I already know that if I throw Natasha in, she's not going to end up, Silverwolf at least, isn't going to end up trying to debuff the enemy again with physical. So Natasha works out great. Bailu does too. So the only weakness that Silverwolf would consider applying is Quantum based on her and Zila. That's if the team is set up like Zila, Bailu as your healer, and then you wanted to hypothetically throw in either a Serval or Tingyun. If I throw in Fire MC, then I have the issue of, well, it's either going to be Quantum or Fire because those are the only 2 things Shepard is not weak to. So you can kind of gauge her value based on if the enemy or not is weak to you. In this instance, my main damage healer doesn't do anything. So it's actually advised in that team for me to slide Silverwolf over here. This is because if the enemy has no way to be weakness broken by the main damage healer or the vast majority of the team, it's kind of a dead weight. But she's flexible, versatile, and she does work in the vast majority of situations. So for me personally, if you're looking at just this banner in particular, and you're questioning should you pull, honestly, the 5-star unit alone is worth the pull. If you're looking at her light cone, it's additional damage, don't get me wrong. I like it. The thighs are very nice. Look at them. They're great. But the free-to-play Lycone you get is perfectly fine too. It's pretty cute. For the 4 stars, Asta is good. Serval, if you have Jing Yuan, you probably won't use her, but Serval is great, especially with more Eidolons. Dan Heng, if you use him, well, you obviously won't mind any Eidolons. Realistically speaking, no matter what, the 5-star is the character you want to evaluate. We're so early in the game that any Eidolons are a good Eidolon. And she's kind of cute. Would I recommend her over Locha? That's the issue. I honestly would still say no. If you don't have a Bailu, if you don't have that secondary healer, she's good, but she's not good enough to say, hey, my team doesn't need that survivability. If you do have a Japard, or maybe somebody to an extent to where you don't need a healer, fine. You can consider it, but realistically, I will always advocate for survivability, especially if you want to push into the harder content in the game, rather than just being able to buff up your damage healer, because that's what she is. She is the character who buffs up your damage healers. If you have Tingyun on one side, and that works great for that enemy's weakness, then you want to throw Silverwolf on the other to buff up the other character. That's realistically the position she sits in. She's an agility character, she's not dealing damage over time, she's debuffing the enemy, and she's, technically speaking, buffing your allies. So she does have her benefits, but she doesn't change your team's survivability unless you count slightly reducing the enemy's attack and speed. But in endgame content, if you aren't at level, if you cannot survive, if you don't have a shield strong enough, if you don't have a healer that can keep you alive and revive or cleanse you or whatever the case may be, Locha's your best bet. Either way, that's going to be it for me. on this video. As you can see, I have a bunch of characters. I've tested her out with Yanqing, Xiled, Jing Yuan, etc. And I do find she works pretty comfortably with any of them. She's not a skill point hungry character. It's usually skill and then 2 basics after, so she's perfectly fine with it. Her ultimate for me is pretty nice, and obviously I have the bonus damage from her light cone here with the Aether Code, which is 12% additional damage. I think overall she's a fine character. Don't get me wrong. Defense reduction and being able to implant a weakness is great for any team, but I don't think it's a good idea to sacrifice your team's overall survivability and health, especially for your account, to pull her. Because she's fun, she's cute, she does a lot for your team, but she won't keep them alive. She will just make them stronger. That's gonna do it for me on this video. If you did indeed enjoy, consider subscribing. And I'll see you next time.